Okay, let's get started here. We are scheduled here between 6 and 8. I don't know if it's going to be that long. Maybe it'll be 5 minutes. Good. I want to welcome everybody to Village Royal Palm Beach State Road 7 Commercial Corridor Study. This is our first public workshop as it relates to State Road 7. We have hired the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to study this section of roadway and look at the possibilities going forward. I don't want to ruin any of their presentations, so I'll turn it over to Daniel Little from Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council in just a second, and look to introduce his group. For people here, our mayor is here, Mayor Fred Pinto, Jeff Mayer, Councilman Jeff Mayer, Councilman Yanner Dusky, our police captain, our planner, Bradford, and who else do we have? Oh, we have Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council here, and one of our residents. How you doing? And welcome, Diane. Diane came to the State Road 7 study, what, about a month ago? Yeah. And you were one of the few residents at that one, too. And we thank you for your participation. And with that, I want to turn it over to Daniel Little, the project manager for this project.
Good evening. Thank you for attending. My name is Daniel Little. I'm the Urban Design Director for Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. And with our team tonight, we have Kim Delaney, Dr. Kim Delaney, Jessica Seymour Porter, who is, I think, there she is, and the front gate, and Stephanie Hyde, who's here with us as well. This evening is, as Mr. Ligon said, thank you for the introduction. We are kicking off our first workshop of this effort. There's a few different State Road 7 studies that are going on. We'll discuss that a little bit. One of which is this one, which is to look at some of the commercial parcels and see are there ways and to either encourage or control the conversion of those into other uses of time if it's desirable. But also we have James Reinhardt here from the Transportation Planning Agency of Palm Beach County. They're doing a premium transit study. So I'm going to do my best this evening to try to intersect these two studies that are happening and hopefully give you some good visual food and give us something to think about as we kick off this effort. This is a multi-agency process. We are a public agency, the Regional Planning Council. We are working obviously for the Village of Royal Palm Beach, but also one of our partners in this effort is the TPA. So we are in lockstep with what the TPA is doing, and James and I are in pretty constant contact, more so as we go forward. Oops. Am I controlling the slides?
I'm not.
Okay. Somebody should. Just a couple of fun facts about the Regional Planning Council. We are 4 counties: Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River counties. We're one of 10 regional planning councils statewide. There's 2 million people in 52 municipalities within our region. It's 3,700 square miles, and we provide technical assistance to local government. So we've got a series of different departments within our agency, and we sort of act as adjunct staff to local governments within our region. And in fact, Councilman Tamar is one of our board members. So thank you for attending. I missed a slide. So the key objectives, the primary objectives of this effort is A, to develop a community-based vision for desirable redevelopment along the State Road 7 441 corridor, the commercial parcels along the corridor. We also want to identify future community connections within the village, better to link the bicycle, pedestrian, parks, and blueway systems that already exist. We have a phenomenally robust system of bike trails, bike paths, interconnected waterways. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But we want to investigate and see if there are some key missing links that can actually connect the village even further. We want to advance the first mile and last mile improvements to support future premium transit on State Road 7. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And also, at the end of this, we hope to provide staff, Bradford especially, with detailed recommendations for any comprehensive plan or land development regulations modifications to help implement whatever the vision is that we come up with. So we start with this conversation, we talk about if there is redevelopment, what is appropriate redevelopment for the village, for your context, for your scale and character. And then what does that look like? We'll test it, and then we turn it into regulations so that you can actually make it happen. The process to date, we kicked this off in early July, end of June. We've conducted over 20 individual interviews, including residents, elected officials, board members, et cetera, city staff, the TPA as well. And I'd like to offer a special thanks to Mayor Pinto, Vice Mayor Voluntas, Councilwoman Samio, excuse me, I can barely see, Councilwoman Radusky, and Councilman Tamara, who took your time, though it was virtual, and spend time with me and discuss this project and your thoughts about this effort. As well as I'd like to thank Manager Liggins, Brad O'Brien as well, Lou Recchio of Parks and Rec, Chris Marsh, the village engineer, and I'd especially like to thank Chris Wax, who's not here, but I gave her extra exclamation points because she's been phenomenal in terms of helping me guide this. And then James, who's here from the TPA as well. So James is the project manager for the transit study that we'll discuss in just a moment. So this is who you are. This is your village. This is the area of the municipal village of Royal Palm Beach. This is Okeechobee Boulevard here. That's your east-west central corridor. Your southern edge at Southern Boulevard represents most of your southern edge. State Road 7 is most of your eastern edge, primary north-south corridor. Royal Palm Beach Boulevard, your core north-south connector, which creates sort of the main intersection with Okeechobee Boulevard, and then Crestwood Boulevard here. These are the primary arterials, if you will, or major connectors and edges within your village. And this is important for us to start understanding not only the geography, but how different parts of the village are, how the uses are distributed and how the traffic flow and connections work. So as I said, we're here to contemplate the future redevelopment along the corridor. And one of the things I wanted to discuss is that, there has been transitioning in the evolution of planning in Palm Beach County for a long time. The idea of converting commercial uses or commercial corridors into mixed use or residential development is not really new. In fact, in Palm Beach County, they've been working, various municipalities have been working for 30 years on basically growing the trend towards urbanism in Palm Beach County. So you see up here to the left, Delray Beach, which used to be known as Delray Beach before they started reinventing themselves in an urban fashion. Here's City Place, of course, and Clematis Street there in West Palm Beach. And even some of the more suburban areas. Jupiter, this is Military Trail to the north, or on top here. After Abaco began development, they changed their regulations to start to encourage a mixed use type of more urban. And by urban, I don't mean high rise. I mean creating public spaces, buildings that address the street, hiding parking as opposed to having huge fields of parking, etc. And then even Boynton Beach down to the left here, which is kind of hard to see, their town center is really phenomenal, and it fronts Congress Avenue, which isn't really much different from an arterial as State Road 7 is. And then down here to the right, this is one of the first residential projects ever built on US 1, US Highway 1. It's the downtown townhouses in Delray Beach. And I remember at the time when they came through the land use to try to convert the commercial land uses to residential, everybody thought they were insane. Why would anybody live on US 1? Well, now you can see through virtually most of Palm Beach County, there are residential developments on US 1. Some are more successful than others. But a lot of it has to do with how the road is tamed and the character of the street and the public spaces that are created and the detailing of the street. That's something we're going to talk about tonight. This is the first public workshop in person that I at least have been in 2 years. And COVID has affected everyone in a variety of different ways. When we talk to our economists, our work, like all of your jobs, has shifted significantly, going to online, Jessica sent me an email or an article today that the worst of both worlds now is you're actually in the office and doing a Zoom call. So, but you know, we're never going to go back, I think, to where we were a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And the economists that we work with, you know, there's a mantra that we hear frequently, and I wanted to present it to you this evening, in that many of the COVID didn't create a lot of economic trends. Many of the economic trends that we're seeing today were already in place, but COVID has accelerated their process. And a few of those that I wanted to just point out. Regional malls are even more vulnerable than they've ever been before. You may have heard that we're working to your neighbor to the south in Wellington. And there are conversations that are being had right now regarding the Wellington Mall that would not have been happening 2.5 years ago. And it's pretty astonishing. Online shopping, of course, is more prevalent than it's ever been. You know, pre-COVID, people thought, well, you know, online shopping is what's killing retail. Well, it's only 12 or 15 or 16% of all shopping was online. I don't know the number now, but it has to exceed that by at least twice. Live-work balance, flexibility is a greater priority perhaps than it's been before. A lot of folks had the opportunity, if you're fortunate enough, to work from home. And then that afforded you certain flexibilities depending upon what your commute is like, et cetera, that maybe you didn't have before. Or if you were unfortunate enough to be out of work, you found other things to do. So balancing life and work, I think, is one of the trends that has been strengthened or fostered further through our experience with the pandemic. The Great Resignation, I have to confess, I heard that term for the first time just the other day. Thank you, Jessica and Stephanie. But we all know what it is. It's like, where is the service industry workers? Where are all the restaurant employees? Where are they going? Why are employers having such a hard time, particularly in those industries, to get employees? There's a lot of different theories about that, but I would suggest that there's no single reason. There's a lot, you know, you hear that, well, it was unemployment, or it's that people have thought, well, I didn't like my job anyway, now I can focus on getting, you know, the degree that I always thought I'd get. Some folks, you know, one of the things I didn't put it on the list, well, it's sort of on the list, but, you know, the flood of folks that are moving to South Florida. I have 2 or 3 friends that are in Michigan or New Jersey, and they're like, you know, we were always talking about moving to Florida. Well, now that I can work online, let's just do it. You know, let's just go. Placemaking has become essential, I think. It was essential before, but now that folks have flexibility, we used to hear this about the millennials. The millennials moved to where they wanted to live and then got a job wherever they were, as opposed to the other way around, which is they used to go to Buffalo or wherever because that's where the job was. Well, now that we've sort of beta tested this working from home or working remotely environment, desirability of your place to live is even more important than it was before. And it shows, frankly, by the real estate values that are astronomical at this point right now. Not only to buy, but to rent. If you know anybody's trying to find a place to rent, it's not a fun task these days. And then transit-oriented development. You know, Kim, my colleague, you know, she lives in the realm of transportation and transportation planning and economic development relative to that. And we were debating in the beginning, early stages of the pandemic. I mean, are people ever going to get back to the bus? Are they ever going to get on a train? And you know, we see signs. I think it's encouraging. You know, you listen to Steve Abrams of Tri-Rail, and that they're starting to see the numbers increase again on Tri-Rail. Brightline is back open again. So these are positive things. But what we know is that with your stump speech, as you were saying before, people are not stopping the flood to South Florida. And we are going to run out of land. And we need to be smart about how we grow. And that's why I'm so excited that this effort is dovetailing and aligning with the PPA effort we're discussing. And even here, you've seen development pressure. I mean, as recently as last year, my understanding is that when Regal closed, because of the pandemic, there was a discussion or even a move to try to change the land uses and maybe turn it into a number of apartments, hundreds of apartments units. And of course, if I misspeak, somebody please jump in. But part of our job now is to figure out not only what would an appropriate redevelopment of, say, a parcel like Regal look like, but help to craft the regulations to enable that to happen. I'm going to get a little wonky later in terms of land use and zoning, but it's important because that's sort of the behind the scenes, the heavy lifting task that we're working with your staff on. So there are three main components to this project. Number one is this State Road 7 commercial corridor analysis. And you'll hear me say this over and over and over again, and I apologize up front, but what is the appropriate scale, use, type of redevelopment for the corridor? We know that retail, we don't know what the future of retail is going to be. We really don't. We know that it's taken an enormous hit, all commercial, except for industry, but all commercial real estate has free fall in many cases because of COVID. So as we look at the corridor, which is your eastern facade, your eastern front, what should that redevelopment look like? We've already heard that, you know, Regal was sniffing around a year or so ago about maybe redeveloping. Now they're open again, and we don't know, you know, what those interests are going forward. But this is really primary task number one for us, is this corridor study. And I'm going to show you images of other places, and I realize that there's not an apples to apples comparison, and you'll see why in a few minutes. But there are other cities within our region, within this county, that are actually taking risks. This is US 1 in West Palm Beach, 3-story. This was originally proposed to be 5 15-story towers, and the community went berserk. So they went back, they retooled, they sharpened their pencils, they came back with really a quite beautiful apartment project that opened right in the middle of the pandemic. It's full. My understanding is it's close to capacity. But it's an urban facade. It's an urban front. Not urban in the sense that it's high rise, but it's urban in the sense that it creates urban spaces. And it's a mixed use project. It's got ground floor flexible uses, not mandating retail. In the old days, we used to make a mistake and say, we're going to have mixed use and we're going to demand that the ground floor be retail, whether there's a market for it or not. We don't care if it stays dark for the next 10 years. And that's what would happen. So one of the things that we'll be discussing with Bradford and your staff is how do you craft language so that you can be flexible? How do you encourage a type of construction that can be flexible and can transition or evolve over time in terms of its uses? Number two big task for us, as I mentioned, is looking at identifying additional linkages and enhancements within your existing bicycle pedestrian network. I will say this over and over again as well. I have, in my 30 some odd years of working in this business, I have never seen a village of your size or a local government of your size that has put so much emphasis and care and detail into these systems that you have. Your park system is unbelievable. And this map, which I know you can't really see the details of, this is the existing bicycle pedestrian improvements map. Most of it's complete. It's phenomenal what this village, a small village, has done for its residents over the years. And you know, a lot of cities strive to sort of do this, but it seems like the fluffy stuff around the edges. You know, we gotta, you know, but you've got all the heavy stuff taken care of. So you're able to adorn your village with things like lovely bicycle and pedestrian connections. However, you know, we understand that there might still be a few links. You know, one of the things that I find interesting that I've learned in the last few months is that the water courses that you have, which are lovely, are also barriers too. So, you know, where are some ways to connect some of these key parks and these key linkages? And we'll be working with your staff on that. And then finally, number three, I mentioned before the first and last mile connections. Now, Mayor Pinto and council members, Lesky and Laura, I know that you know this term, but for those that don't, the first and last mile, that term refers to that first mile that gets you from your house to the transit station or the bus stop, and that last mile that gets you from the bus stop or the transit station to your ultimate destination. As Kim Delaney, I try to quote her as much as I can, but for years she said, you know, but every transit trip starts and ends as a pedestrian. You know, you're getting off the bus to the bus stop to wherever your ultimate destination is. One of the challenges, and it's no fault of theirs, and Tri-Rail has had all of these years, is that, you know, their stops aren't usually where your ultimate destination is. You've got to take another trip to get there. So here's an example. This is the village at Tuttle Royale. This is the master plan, and I'm sorry, I know it's small to see. I'm going to stand here and just point if that's all right. This is State Road 7 here, Southern Boulevard. This is Tuttle Boulevard coming in. And what I'm going to click to right now, if you can see that, that's Erica Boulevard. That's the corridor that will be built that will connect the heart of this community to State Road 7, where within this vicinity, we believe, there may be a transit station at some point that will tie into, you know, the premium transit. However, if this road isn't detailed in such a way that it has adequate sidewalk, places for bicycles, shade trees, because, you know, you all are pretty tough out here. I've seen that at, you know, I've seen people walking up there. But, you know, there's fewer things that enhance a pedestrian or bicycle trip more than shade. So the details of this are really, really important to make sure that this becomes a positive first and last mile connection, because you've got a big pile of really nice apartments here that could very easily take transit into downtown. So this would be their first mile and it would be their last mile coming home. And that's got to be a positive trip. Otherwise, I'll find an alternative. And that's on, and James will tell you all day, that's the trick the transit operators and Palm Train and others deal with all the time. You know, how do we maintain efficiency and how do we keep choice riders, those that have a choice to either drive or take? This is Erica and Tuttle. This is the beginning stages of Erica looking to the east, and it will connect between Publix and Lowe's. So one of our tasks is to look at not only that connection, but some other connections within the Tuttle Royale development for those first and last mile connections. Now, I had the great privilege years ago of working a number of times with my world famous traffic engineer. He was one of these guys, Walter Coolhouse, he would tell you, you know, that he was a seasoned traffic engineer and for 30 years did the wrong thing. And he realized it at the end and said, you know what, we need to be thinking about movement of people as opposed to the building of roads. My favorite quote of his was, building more travel lanes to combat congestion is like loosening your belt to combat obesity. It induces traffic, or it may induce eating. I'm not really sure, but I thought I'd get a hearty laugh at it. Maybe you all read it already, but there you've heard it. But it's really, really important because we cannot build our way ultimately out of the regional congestion that we have. In fact, we're going to need all hands on deck. We're going to need all available mobility options going forward to maintain a sustainable and livable region. I have family down in Miami, and I'm dreading going down there for Thanksgiving, you know, because it is a constant flow of cars. And, you know, we can do better things. So, like I said earlier, we're really fortunate that this effort, and maybe it was kismet, maybe it was designed this way, but we're really fortunate that the TPA, the Transportation Planning Agency, if you don't know who they are, Mayor Pinto is the chair of that board. They do the transportation planning and long-range transportation planning for Palm Beach County, as well as provide funding sources for different local projects. They are embarking on, what is it, James, a 3-year study, maybe 2.5-year study? Something like that. Of looking at land uses and transit options between the mall at Wellington Green, up State Road 7 to downtown West Palm Beach. And we'll see a larger image of that in a moment. They're developing tons of metrics and analytics understanding what is the crash profile at different locations on State Road 7 and Okeechobee Boulevard. What are the population trends and demographics? You know, how many minorities and seniors and just those that are disabled, those that might be transit dependent. What's the household profiles? Low income versus those that only have one car versus those that don't have a car. You know, folks that live on Palm Beach Island may not be taking transit as frequently as some of these folks that are living on the corridor of State Road 7 and Okeechobee Boulevard, and that's very important. So I'm not going to read this to you, of course, and you know, James, you go into this later if you have questions. But I wanted to point out of all of the different aspects, this is a very complex project that they're looking at, but of all the different aspects, because they want to get it right. They want to make sure that not only you locate the stops in the right place and that they are designed and located properly within the right of way and that there are those first and last connections, but also that you're using the right train, you're using the right form. And they're even looking at like, which I'm very excited about. Because once you put it in the ground, it doesn't move around. Bus routes change all the time. And so that becomes an economic trigger, actually. When developers see rail going in the ground, go look at downtown West Palm Beach, what Brightline has done for that area. It's really phenomenal. But they're really focusing as well or encouraging local governments to look at transit-based nodal development. What does it look like? What does redevelopment look like around these stations? Again, I live just outside of downtown West Palm, and I cannot believe what's happened around Brightline. It's phenomenal. I've got friends that are attorneys that say, look, we recruit lawyers from Miami to come up, sell their car, and we'll take Brightline down to go to court, you know, and just live right across the street and be in downtown. We hear lots of those type of stories. You've got to get it right. The details are very important. Connectivity, you'll hear us say this over and over again, is very important. Not only on foot, on bike, on car, all modes. And so we are working closely, the TPA and Treasure Coast, to ensure that we're rowing in the same direction. You know, we aren't transit experts like they are. We are designers though, and so we can work on making sure that the details match the vision of the transit service. So this is a larger image of that study. This a little squirrely. So this is downtown West Palm Beach. I think it's about a 13-mile segment, the entire stretch from downtown to the mall at Wellington Green. That would be the terminus, I guess, for this first phase. And you'll notice right here at the intersection of Okeechobee and State Road 7 and Southern Boulevard, this is Royal Palm Beach. This is you. These are very, very important stops. We don't know exactly where they'll be, but I can tell you this one here is critical. Okeechobee Boulevard. They're all critical, but this turn and what happens here and how that transit service makes that turn and then comes back and how that affects growth and redevelopment there is going to be very, very important. And it's very exciting because, as I mentioned, we're working with Wellington down here, and there's some exciting ideas that are coming out about the potential partial or complete redevelopment of the mall over time, and how transit can actually become an important circulator within that. So you won't ever redevelop something as large. That's 97 acres. That's 3/4. Downtown West Palm Beach from Okeechobee Boulevard to Datura, from Quadrille to the Intercoastal, that's the size of the mall in Wellington Green. They could build it downtown. So the terminus makes a lot of sense, but you will feed off of that energy. So having this, being this well positioned is really, really important going forward. And it makes the case for this effort that we're underway. Now, it's really important though, however, as we work with your staff and with Mr. Liggins, that we keep in mind the context that we're dealing with. There are so many amazing things. I just want to just run through a scorecard of fabulous things in this village. I have to confess, I've only, until this effort, I've only ever really experienced personally your village from the edges. From State Road 7, from Southern Boulevard. And occasionally my son was in the Scouts, we go out to Corbett And so we drive through up to children. And I go, wow, where's this? But never have I been in the neighborhoods. Nobody out there likes it. But it's it really doesn't do you a service. I mean, because I have just been, we as a team have been blown away at what we've seen in this village. And so I wanted to take a few minutes just to run through some of these things. I cannot believe that you have 22 or 23 parks within the village. It's astonishing to me, and they're incredibly diverse. It's amazing the different uses that you have in your parks, skate parks, the commons, you know, public facilities. My favorite is the preserve. I can't get over how beautiful that is with bike trails, etc. And you've got the campus of 2 schools. It's just, it's incredibly unique to see this. And the water courses as well. Just really, really beautiful. And you've done a great job, I think, of trying to take advantage of those for your residents. And I mean, I don't know of another, you know, yeah, I don't know of another local government that has built so many fabulous pedestrian bridges over these canals. It's just amazing. And it didn't matter what time of day or afternoon or what day of the week that I was out there, there's always people walking the bike and using it. They didn't go to waste, that's for sure. And then this is the preserved park down at the bottom, which is just beautiful. The miles and miles and miles. I understand that there are some neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks and want to stay that way, and that's fine. But you know, the miles and miles of bike lanes that you put in, and the connections to, you know, the easement, so you've actually got a corridor literally to traverse the entire length of the village is very impressive. Although, if I had my way, we'd have a tree or two out here, but I understand the reason why. But I've been in touch with Chris and with Lou Recchio, your Parks Director, and we're going to do a detailed dive into how you can improve that experience. You know, I thought I wasn't being smart out, but I thought I was being really smart. And I was pointing to, in some of our interviews, I think I showed you Central Boulevard in Abacoa. They really beautifully landscaped that. It's gorgeous. I thought, well, here's precedent for this. You know, we could do this here. But I didn't realize just the intensity of the power distribution services that you have. And I heard some stories about things, you know, melting, catching on fire and stuff. So we can't be irresponsible about it. But we are going to work with your staff to look at ways that we can improve that, because it is used, and I think that it could be improved.
Was that a joke about things catching fire?
No.
From the power line?
That's what I heard.
Irresponsible contractors.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into I don't know the details, but just that it's very electric.
They hit the line, so I mean, they were being irresponsible.
Yeah, I like this power line.
Right.
I haven't seen one person catch
Well, Bacco did and Rain did.
You've got really beautiful neighborhood streets, well-detailed, mature trees. I personally love Royal Palm Beach Boulevard. It's really amazing what you've done. It's so funny to me, something so simple. I mean, when you go out to Palm Beach on Royal Poinciana Way, you know, there's the very regular, regimented, disciplined planting of the royal palms, and cities are so afraid to do it. I know it's too silly, but it really makes a statement. And it's like I said, it's unfortunate, I think, that so many people don't experience the inside of your village, maybe because they're too busy racing up and down State Road 7 or Southern Boulevard. The cultural facilities, I was surprised that this building itself was just built 2 years ago, or was rehabbed and expanded 2 years ago in the ballroom there. I told everybody it sits on our team, you gotta go look at this, it's amazing. Like I said, I don't know of any place really of this size, of this scale, as a small village that has these type of features for its community. And you are so into your public art that I actually had the wrong picture up here of this gateway because you just redid it and I didn't realize. So we had to, you know, your manager with an eagle eye fixed that and we got the updated picture. But you know, you've adorned your city with, your village with beautiful public art, and it shows, and it makes a difference. You know, it makes people. I remember hearing a quote. There's this Italian planner who said, you know, in Italy, when we're rich, We adorn our city with art so that when we're poor, we still feel it. I always thought that was nice. And of course, your schools. So, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but I'm expressing to you how unique it is to have all of these things in such a compact area. Oh, and why not? Build a new village hall as well as the new campus. So that's going to be fabulous. And I understand that you've actually started groundbreaking, and you should be completing November of 2023. So you guys don't let the grass grow into your feet. You should be really proud of all the things you've done. However, then there's State Road 7. And this is no fault of yours. But it is, unfortunately, it is your front door. As I said, I haven't had a reason to explore the neighborhoods of Royal Palm Beach until recently. And so I just saw this as welcome to Royal Palm Beach. This is what it looks like. And it really does a disservice to all that you've done within the village. I don't know how we fix this. I don't know that this can be. But we are going to do our best to figure out ways to working with DOT and, companion local governments to figure out ways to hopefully make some improvements along this corridor. Because as a pedestrian, this is what it's like. It's always a bad sign when there are sound walls on local at-grade roads. That means something's wrong. Unfortunately, for our offices up in Stewart, Little Stewart, they widened Canner Highway up from 95 into Stewart, and a number of neighborhoods have put up sound walls. This is Stewart. And what does it do? It pins your pedestrians in. Now, at least this fellow's got a lot of grass. But I can tell you, there are locations near Palm Beach Gardens, on Military Trail. I've got photographs of kids getting off the bus on an 8-foot sidewalk, 6 lanes next to them, and they're pinned in against a 14-foot sound wall. They got nowhere to go. And so this to me is always a litmus test, or it's a symptom of something being wrong. The neighbors can't handle what's happening on the road. But as far as a pedestrian environment, it's no place you necessarily want to be. And I was shocked. I actually did the measurement today. This is a 450-foot right-of-way, nearly 450 feet. Now that's about a 2.5-minute walk in a good environment. A 2-minute walk in a good environment. This you've got, I don't know if you can call that a sidewalk. This is retention, I understand. This stuff is needed to carry the water from the road. But here's what perplexes me, and I've talked to James about this quite a bit. Say we get premium transit right here in the middle of State Road 7. How are we going to get there? And let's say we get some really great redevelopment over here on the west side, excuse me, the east side. How will it ever feel connected to the village? I mean, we don't want to participate in designer sprawl, just to take one big box out and put a bunch of apartments in, it's still disconnected from everything else. We've got to figure out a way to improve this. Now, I may be Pollyannish about this, but I don't see any overhead power lines. I mean, I understand that there's probably limitations to planting because of the impacts of hardening the soils for retention and detention and percolation and all that. But we're going to do our best to try to figure out ways that this can become a more positive environment. Every single person I spoke to in the interview process mentioned this intersection. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an economist, but these look like big, expensive beams. This looks like a lot of money was put into engineering and building this thing, and it's a miserable experience for everything else. Again, I don't think there's anything we're going to be able to do about this, but I think it's important that we recognize it as a group and understand that, this isn't where your transit stop's going to be. That's for sure. And I just want to recognize that it's a challenge. And part of it is, as I understand, is some of the regional uses of it. Sometimes you forget. You keep going a little bit further west, and you're in Beltway, Oakey, and South Bay. And, you know, there's a migration for work and there's a migration for shopping as well. So, but I did want to acknowledge this because I did hear it literally with every interview that I had. So let's take a quick tour, a more detailed tour of State Road 7, the corridor itself. I already showed you, this is the bend up here at State Road 7 north of Okeechobee. So if we take a look at this area here, because I want to with you walk through what are the elements that make up State Road 7? What is fronting? So this area here between Okeechobee just south, what do we have? We've got the Weldon property here, which is that big forested piece on the southeast corner of Okeechobee in State Road 7. I believe it's about 52 acres, something like that. Interestingly enough, it has a general commercial and commercial future land use and zoning. The Target is here, the Regal Cinema is there, Aldi is here, Breakers West, Counterpoint East. So what does this tell us? One of the things that we do as we go through this process is, okay, if we're going to test different sites for redevelopment and test, you know, what a code might look like at redeveloping one of these, what are sites that are likely to redevelop? There's no point in testing the Aldi site. Okay. And there's probably no point in testing the Target site. Regal, we know, had an interest at some point. So that's probably one of the sites that we'll test to see if there's a way to integrate some type of redevelopment here and maybe even future connections. It's very hard to go back and, as you know, even with sidewalks, it's very hard to go back and retrofit connections. But we'll look at it. Breakers West, obviously, that's not going to redevelop in St. County. But this is that north end. Oh, and by the way, the Weldon property, considering what its future, I mean, as beautiful as it is, considering what its future land use is and what its zoning is today, the quote unquote entitlements, and also considering that this is that important turn for the future premium transit, I think we'll have to look at that site as well. So if we look a little bit further south, this is Belvedere down to Southern. What's fronting the corridor there? We'll zoom in. Here's Belvedere. Belvedere terminates into Counterpoint. Bellaterra is here. Southern Boulevard on the bottom. So we've got Walmart. And I just chose some of the big boxes. I don't really know the names of the different centers, but or I figured it might be easier to remember which ones are which. Walmart, Big Lots, Ross, Beals, or Bells, excuse me, I always call it Beals, or Burlington is here as well. And then Christ, thank you, Christ Fellowship Church. So Walmart probably is not going to go anywhere. I'm pretty certain Christ Fellowship Church is not going to go anywhere. Big Lots and Ross, maybe one of them is worth looking at. You know, ideally something on the the west side that is more connected or integrated into the village. So you don't have to cross that 300, 400 foot right of way. But then look, you know, you're backing up to houses here and there's probably going to be very difficult to connect any of that. You might be able to connect it pedestrian wise, bikes and pedestrians and things of that nature between some of these parcels. But, and then the Bell site too. Now I heard about that quite a bit with the interview process. I think though, and this is one of the reasons why now that I remember, one of the reasons why I brought up the image of underneath here, whatever you do, if this site ever redevelops, which it might, you don't want to exacerbate the problems that are already here. So again, connectivity is the name of the game because retrofitting it when you've got the water courses and the parcels and the development patterns you have may be challenging for some of these sites. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, we're asked to look at the south side of Southern here. This is an older aerial, of course, because this is all built out now, Tuttle Royale, Lowe's, and Publix. And then, of course, that connection through here. Lowe's and Publix, I don't think they're going anywhere, but we do have work to do looking at those connections internally. So again, we're looking at how redeveloping can actually improve some of the conditions, hopefully, not just make them worse, especially within that 400, 350, 450 right of way. So our key tasks, I promise I'm wrapping up. Number one, we're going for a regulatory analysis. I've shown in detail. For those of you that don't know, there's really two levels of land use regulation and development regulation in the planning. There's your comprehensive plan, which lives at about 15 or 20,000 feet with future land use. And then there's your zoning. And they should be in, compliance. They should be, what was the word I'm looking for? They should be in sync with one another. Thank you. So if you've got commercial land uses, you have some sort of commercial zoning, right? And the zoning is what tells you your setbacks, your parking requirements, all of that. So these parcels, all of this red stuff is commercial land use. And I can tell you right now, the commercial land use it prohibits residential uses. You cannot put residential in the commercial land use today. And so if there is to be a site that is to redevelop, they would be required to find some other land use. And so the question is, what is that? Is it better to craft something new, knowing where you want to go, or using old zone? And the same thing stands for the zoning. There's what's called commercial general, a general commercial zoning in these areas. And it also does not allow residential, and it does not allow vertically integrated mixed use. Now I think, Bradford, there's a roundabout way to get through that. We have PUD process you had mentioned, but even still, residential is not permitted. So if you want to encourage redevelopment of some of these sites, you want to make it easier. We were talking about this before. Make the good easy and make the bad challenging. So there's going to be a detailed regulatory review and recommendations through this process to try to help implement whatever the vision may be. Also through this, we're going to be evaluating other examples. For years, I didn't know what it was, but driving back and forth on Southern Boulevard, I always found it interesting that there was this shopping center. Granted, it's a standard shopping center, but the treatment of the stormwater was treated as an amenity, not some leftover piece. And in fact, like this is Carrabba's here, they actually use it as an amenity. And it's the one place on Southern Boulevard, west of, I don't know, Dixie Highway, that to me, it caught my eye and was interesting. That you took something that was a requirement, a utility, and actually tried to make something interesting out of it. So I'm hoping that maybe we can, using that frame of mind, come up with ways or examples of how to improve the conditions on State Road 7. And we're going to test different sites. This is the Weldon property that I mentioned earlier. It's about 52 acres, the corner of Okeechobee and State Road 7. And when I mean test them, we're actually going to do designs. We're going to do detailed designs. Granted, they're conceptual. They're not ready for permit or construction, but where we can actually start to measure square footages, actually start to see what will fit on one of these sites. Let's say the community says, oh, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention is that the GC, the general commercial, it's limited to 2 stories, 32 or 34 feet or whatever it is. I mean, on a road like State Road 7, you saw some of the images I showed earlier, 3-4 stories fits really well in that type of right of way. So, we'll test these sites, we'll design, a potential design so that we can back out of that and come up with reasonable numbers that would go into what future zoning might be. And, what is the aesthetic? I mean, what are some of the planning principles? This is a project where we were showing redevelopment and they wanted to front onto US 1. These are 20-foot sidewalks. These are a number of, 5, 6, 7-story buildings. All the parking is contained. Maybe there's some on-street parking, maybe not on US 1, but you're putting your public face to the street. You're actually creating the public realm. And we believe firmly that it's not too late to do that. And some of the details. How can you handle some of the details, some of the architecture? And if that's desired, we can work with your staff to help that. So maybe we're creating a standalone package. And if you were an investor or developer and you came in and said, listen, I own a commercial piece of property and I want to do all this great stuff and I want to benefit from additional height and I want to benefit from residential uses and I want to benefit from things that I'm not allowed to do today, well, maybe I'll comply with all of these things. And maybe spend a little bit more money and detail it better and provide real shade trees and things like that. So it can be a point of negotiation and leverage for the village. And then finally, the linkages, like I already talked about this at length. I'm really impressed that you have this. It looks so high.
It's wonderful.
Is it?
For me,
Yeah.
but there's only like 5 of us out there.
And the first and last mile improvements that we talked about. So I'm wrapping up here tonight. This is what we want to hear from you. We want to see if you can answer a few questions or pose questions that aren't being asked of you. That question and that's 1,000. What is appropriate? What is an appropriate scale? I mean, you may not know. You may not know height, or you may not know number of floors, but like, is there a place that you've been in Palm Beach County or other places that seems like, wow, that would be a good fit here? You know, it doesn't have to be, well, we need this density or this intensity, but you know, hey, I like what they're doing in Boynton Beach, or I like what Jupiter has done, or I like what they're doing in Alton, or whatever. What's appropriate for State Road 7 in Royal Palm Beach? What are some of the, this is important for us. Dennis, you might be a real help in this, because what are some of the key missing links? You know, if you're at Commons Park and you're like, I really wish I could get over to the preserve or whatever, you know, but now I got to get back down on the arterial or something. What are some of those links that would just take you, you're already a fantastic system, just and make it miraculous? What are things that are missing? I mean, if I lived here, I can't imagine what I would be missing. But you're the only city that I know that has its own village that I know that has its own off-road bicycle trails. But are there amenities that are missing? You know, I showed this picture in particular. I know it's hard to see from back there, but this is, I always thought this was done really well. This is on Military Trail in Jupiter. And the entrance into this development is, it's a mixed-use development, but the entry is sort of split. So they've got an urban public plaza in the middle. And while you have a lot of really beautiful parks and nature areas, do you have any areas that are sort of urban, you know, where you can have, you know, an urban, sort of by urban, I mean, you know, a plaza or a square or something like that. Maybe that's missing. I don't know. But are there other things that, you know, in the design package that you have of your village that you think, wow, this would be great to have as well? Because that might be something that could be incorporated through redevelopment. And also, you know, what are some other details and improvements that you know, surrounding the corridors? Any thoughts that you have? And we're here as sponges to listen to you this evening. And Bradford, I hope you don't mind, but I put your name up here as a contact. Mine's there too, right next to you. But any other ideas that come to your mind? I mean, you don't have to have them this evening, but you can always reach out to Bradford and myself, the village, anybody. Just reach out to Treasure Coast and just say, hey, you know, I saw the presentation and this occurred to me. And I saw this while I was driving or while I was walking or jogging, and I think this might be a good improvement. We really want to get as much of that input so that we can try to bring it back to you in an implementable fashion. So with that, I really appreciate your time and your attention this evening. And we're all here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Let me say one thing. This is being recorded in a GoToWebinar. Excellent presentation. Got everything out there. That was really good. So it will be available to people after this to look at and provide us comments going forward.
Excellent, thank you. In fact, I think we should maybe point out now that because it is a Zoom meeting, correct?
GoToWebinar.
GoToWebinar, excuse me. Folks that are online can actually ask questions, and Mr. Liggins will manage those and he'll bring them up. And if we have any questions within the room here from in-person human beings, we'll scribe them up there and try to answer them as well. So we're trying to handle both worlds.
So all our online people, all they need to do is hit the raise hand and we will give them their moment.
Greg, how many online people?
We don't typically ask that question.
Say hello to her.
There are a few. Several.
Do any of you have a question or a burning comment or concern? See, everybody's
Want to go back to your question slides, Dan? Use this?
You good? What do you think?
Okay. Diane Fuller, I've been a 40-some year resident here in Royal Palm Beach. And I'm absolutely blown away at the development that's going on. Some of it is wonderful, some of it is really bad. My concern is redeveloping all this stuff, putting in multi housing and stuff, the traffic. This Tuttle Royale is going to be wonderful, but the traffic is going to be absolutely phenomenal. I sold real estate about 20 years ago. We had several metropolitan planners come in a big meeting. This is right when Tri-Rail was starting. All these planners were here for about a week and studied this whole county. First thing they said out of their mouths was Tri-Rail, then the water, because people are addicted to their cars in South Florida. They don't have the connection, like you were saying, the transport into West Palm and stuff. They said if you don't have those kind of connections with Tri-Rail, it's dead in the water. And you know, of course, ridership's down because of the pandemic, but in Brightline, okay, they have a lot of future for that. Ridership isn't anywhere near that cost. My concern is the concentration of more housing, more apartments, more population. And the other concern I have too with all this is called affordable housing. The thing that I've been reading in the paper about all this apartments they're building, and these developers are like, oh, out of 400 some apartments, 20 some of them are going to be affordable housing, around $2,000 a month rent. That's not affordable housing. This has always been a middle class working community out here in Royal Palm. And unfortunately, these developments are driving the average working person out of this community. My husband was a firefighter out here for 30-some years for the county. I'm still working as a dental hygienist. If I wanted to move back, if I wanted to move into Royal Palm right now, we couldn't afford it. My first house I built here, brand new house, 1,500 square feet, $35,000. My second house that I live in now, I'm on the canal, a navigable canal, as Captain knows. Spoke to him many times about the boat traffic. I only built that house for $92,000 30 years ago. The houses in my neighborhood now are selling for almost $500,000. So that's the other thing we have to consider is if we want to redevelop, we have to worry about the working people. And one of the questions you've had is like, why are people having a hard time hiring people? You know why? People are coming into this county because it's too damn expensive to live here. Besides cost of living, our insurance, I just got a letter. My insurance company is dropping my homeowner's insurance because my roof 17 years old. So this is things that we have to worry about. Redevelopment, we have to be conscious of the working class people. And these businesses are hurting because our main goal, main problem is getting too damn expensive to live here. People can't live on $15. Oh, we're raising the wages to $15 an hour. You can't live here in Palm Beach County for $15. For these apartments that are over here in Tuttle Royale, going for $1,500, $1,600 to qualify for that, you have to make almost $60,000. I'm sorry, that's not middle income working people. Firefighters start out at $45,000. Teachers start out at $42,000. That's not the working class people. That is the core of the community. End of discussion.
Well, those are all excellent points. Affordability is a challenge everywhere. It's not just one challenge. One of the things that, and we would have to explore this with your attorneys and certainly your staff. But as I mentioned, a couple things. You may, you're not there yet, but you may find at some point that some of these commercial centers have gone foul. And then what happens? And then somebody's going to want to turn it into something else. And you can fight that battle then, or you can try to get ahead of it. Affordability, I think, is a really important point. My neighborhood used to get affordable. And it's not, and I don't know. I couldn't live, I'm saying, however, what the village has in its favor at this point is that these parcels that I was talking about, you're not allowed to do residential. So you can almost write the rules as you wish. You know, you might be able to increase, this is where we would need to speak to some counsel, but you might be able to actually increase the required percentage of affordability beyond 20 or whatever it might be. You know, I mean, that's a big discussion that needs to happen. But I think that, you know, the village has those police powers. The village has that control of what the land uses and the zoning are. So that really puts you in the catbird seat, I think, going forward. But you got to get it right. And you don't ever want to, that's why I credit, you know, the village for even, you know, considering this effort, because all too often the pressure becomes so great on elected officials, your board members, you know, that you end up giving it away and thinking, well, we'll get it right next time. And I don't think that happens here, but it happens throughout. Well, it happens throughout the country. So this is, I think, hearing your concerns are very important, because those are some of the ingredients that have to go into this recipe.
One of the recipes, like you mentioned, you know, they put, and this was, I guess, a state law that, you know, these developers now, they said, oh, you have to build a certain percentage of your new development has to be affordable housing, but then they put the little fine print in there, oh, if you don't want to do that, just pay us an extra $10 million and you don't have to build affordable housing, just like Avanar out there on North Lake Boulevard, Palm Beach Gardens. They said, oh, we don't think that the working class people would want to live out here, so we're just going to give Palm Beach Gardens $10 million. Well, no, they don't want those kind of people living out there.
And you have to be really careful, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but it's at some point the public perception is that you're selling the village. You're selling, you know.
Well, you're selling out to developers. It's all about the money,
And so,
and that's not right.
and folks that spend their lives in affordable housing will tell you that they want the units. They don't want.
Because when I sold real estate, you know, they're trying to push the SHIP program, which you get through grant from the state and stuff. Well, we all sat there in the meeting, all those realtors were like, look, oh, you get, you know, an $80,000 grant. Where the heck did you find a decent place to live for $80,000? We all sat there and laughed our butts off. Well, this is totally, you know, ridiculous. And I have not been in real estate now for quite a few years, so I don't know what they've upped those grants to. But then, as we know, our wonderful legislature in the state keeps going in and taking out the funds from the SHIP program for other things that they've, you know, done. So I don't need to get political here and stuff, but you know, that's the main problem there is these developers we need to change that thing. You have to build, and then when they're saying so many percentages, like the one I read the other day in Palm Beach Gardens, to build 400 some things there by the future Bright Line station up in the gardens, 400 some apartments. Oh, 20 of them are going to be affordable housing at $2,000 a month rent. I'm like, what?
Well, like I said, you might have, as a village, you might have some control over that. And
Or if we change the, you know,
the
is
other
that a
thing,
local, is that a county thing, or is that a state? It's affordable housing. I thought it was state. Yeah, the state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, the state sets minimum requirements. Yeah, you can exceed that. As a
Yeah.
local government, that's especially.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
All right, very good. Thank you so much.
Okay, so, I just want
Yeah,
to
I'm done.
comment as well. So I appreciate all of this. It sounds wonderful. It's giving me a little bit of anxiety though as I sit here. So a little bit of background. I moved down to New York City 17 years ago and made Royal Palm Beach my home. And when I was making that decision, I went, you know, moved down. I looked from here to Miami and, you know, decided that this cute little quaint little area called Royal Palm Beach would be my home. And I liked it for a number of reasons. I had 3 small kids at the time, so the fact that we had a lot of parks and a lot of activities and family orientation was wonderful. Having come from a large city and seeing how cities have evolved and villages have evolved, I am a little concerned when I hear of, and I know maybe it's necessary, I hear of bringing in rail into the area, creating these urban spaces, because my initial reaction is it's going to transform the village into something that, for me, is probably going to be a little less desirable. But I'm sure there are ways that you can do it. And this is for the village folks, have you guys, I think in order to make some decisions in terms of what you'd like and to answer some of these questions that are here, I think we first have to step back and say, what do we want our village to be like, right? When you think of Nike, you think of, right, you think of their little check
Swoosh.
mark, right? When you think of Coca-Cola, right, there's a certain image. When you think of Palm Beach, what kind of image, right, do you want people, and what kind of feeling do you want people to have? So I think first, before we can, answer a lot of the questions that you've asked, which I appreciate your presentation, I think we need to just take a step back, think that through, define that. What's the vision? Where do we see ourselves in 20 years? Who are the kinds of families or millennials or whoever we want to attract, right? And then sort of having that foundation, then start to think about how do we build for that, 10 years, 20 years out, 30 years out, et cetera. So, so that's, I don't know if you guys have done some of that. You've done that. Okay. And so what, given that answer, what's the vision? Because I didn't see that in the presentation. So for someone who's coming in without having that background, maybe there's that disconnect.
So,
what is it that we'd like?
so our slogan is a place we call home.
Okay.
Our vision is a hometown family community. So that's what we envision when we close our eyes and think about Royal Palm Beach.
Okay.
Our mission statement, what we as staff focus on how to accomplish that vision and that slogan is we provide services and facilities to create an aesthetically pleasing, connected, active community. And things can fall in their right place there. So what you're seeing here is a lot of conversation on connectivity. We're very fortunate in many ways. One of the things, we're 3 miles wide by 4 miles, pretty compact. We have 3 north-south. I know he's got the Crestwood, Royal Palm, but we also have Ponce de Leon, and then the power line corridor. So that's 4 ways to get north and south. We have about 3 major ways to get east and west. We did put bike paths on all of that. The connections, we can, if once we make all the right connections and shortcuts, you can get pretty much all around the village with minimal travel distance. So that's the connected part. The active, we want people to be active here, active in whatever they want to do with all the different choices. And active in the community too can be, you pick a region, not just for Royal Palm Beach, you pick it for everything around you too, what you have available to you, the east, the west, north, and south. When we focus on what we do, we provide services and facilities. That is what we do. Our facilities, we want nice public facilities that the public get to use, that be active and be connected. I think that's, if I keep talking, I'll be redundant.
So was it 2008 when Family Circle magazine identified Palm Beach as one of the top 10 places to raise a young family?
Yeah, and NerdWallet did too, based on value.
So far as target population, we're trying to attract here. I think we're trying to stay with that. That's our sense of what makes us a hometown. At the same time, we've oftentimes talked about we want to be able to provide an environment that we can age up. And so while we certainly want to bring in young professionals, young families, we also want to provide the capabilities to area, which is one of the reasons we, well, the living
Okay, yeah,
facilities here.
assisted living, but-
Yeah, and at the same time, we're looking at how we can encourage or support people aging up where they live. So we're trying to do all of those things, but the young family kind of is what resonates with me. Somebody said to me all the time.
If I may try, first of all, I appreciate your concerns. I totally get it. You've got a great thing here. You don't want to disrupt it. Really, our focus is the edges, these soon to be potentially troubled commercial places, primarily on state, really on state roads. These are the vast boxes and pieces of asphalt that are up. We have no intention of disrupting what's happening on the inside. In fact, as I mentioned a few times, we're trying to maybe, like watch make a few key connections here that will enhance the approach. But as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to see these things go fallow. You want to have a plan in place for what they become later, for what they become on your terms. That's why we're doing this. As far as transit go, I'm glad you brought that up. Because transit, we were talking about this, the oldest trick in the book. You build a big road out to nowhere, and guess what? All the development comes along. And the fear sometimes as well, you build transit and all this development comes along. And some of that may be true. But keep in mind, for those that don't have an opportunity to take transit today, and they work downtown and they got to drive, that's $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year. It's not cheap to have a car. And if a family can dump one of the cars because dad or mom can now take the train or whatever form of transit it is, it's not certain it's going to be a train. That buys a bigger house, or that gets other vacations. You know what I mean? It puts money in the bank. So, I think we have to look at the whole thing comprehensively. And if your village didn't have it, and I can't speak for you, but I would say if your village didn't harbor some similar concerns, we wouldn't be here. Because I can tell you, a lot of cities in our region don't go through this effort because, we'll see what happens when the development comes.
I think Dana made an excellent comment about the edge. And that's one of the reasons we're here today with the Treasure Coast doing this, is because the TPA effort in their premium transit study has identified a loop in Palm Beach County that goes up our eastern edge, State Road 7, down Okeechobee to US 1, down for Dixie Highway, down south to, what's your furthest south you go? Lake Worth Road?
Or all the east west.
Well, yeah, and then you come back east at Lake Worth Road, right? Or back west at Lake Worth Road and Belvedere. Okeechobee, Forestville, and Lake Worth. So their quarter for premium transit, and I would go to their study and look at that and see what they kind of quantified is what's, I think your main study is within an eighth of a mile or a quarter mile of the center.
Are you talking
the center of your premium line, that width of the path that you're looking at, you're going an eighth mile on either side.
That particular map has a mile.
Okay.
So I guess half mile.
But what I thought was interesting about that loop and that alternative that it gives you, it connects a lot of workforces. It connects a very large portion of the population of Palm Beach, surprisingly large portion of the population just within that corridor, and then potential going forward. And what that does, it's on our perimeter, on our edge, and will give us an option that I think is a fortunate option to have. Because it will get more, it will continue to be expensive to live here, and having that ability to get on a premium transit may make sense.
I would tell you this too, even if the village, Royal Palm Beach, doesn't grow by a single housing unit from now into eternity, I can guarantee you everybody else around you is going to follow up all their units. So the growth is going to happen around you, and as many cars as you can get off the road.
And that transportation housing balance is another piece to think about as it reinforces how Royal Palm Beach functions. Because if you can't afford to live where you work, right, that means you're likely going to buy. So there's always a relationship between housing type and form and price point and transportation and congestion on roadways, particularly. So communities that, when you think about the urban models, right, where as communities age over time and the housing stock becomes more diversified, those are communities that are actually much more efficient. There isn't as much inbound morning commute, outbound afternoon commute, road congested in a form that makes it unpleasant. But when you can mix the housing types and price points, you actually create an ability for somebody who works in Target, let's say, to live fairly close to the Target and not have longer commutes that take up all the space on the roadway for the rest of the community. There's a relationship between those two things. State Road 7, it's remarkable looking at the aerials that Dana was presenting to see how much capacity is in those commercial parcels to become something else. If it's able to accommodate residential in a way that works for the community, it actually has an extra benefit of reducing some of the traffic congestion that otherwise will occur. At least that's what we see when we look at other communities, right? That relationship is very discrete and it's consistent. It always happens. So it's an opportunity for the city. It was interesting, really, it was interesting in listening to the hometown emphasis of Royal Palm Beach, right? And when you're a parent, what I always think about is, am I going to be in a place where my kids want to come back? And if they come back, where are they going to live? Because we don't have a lot of opportunities, right, for kids to come back after college, let's say, and live nearby. The housing stock is going up in value. And so without alternatives that give you maybe a smaller unit, maybe controls if the village decides that's appropriate, that you want to help keep prices affordable, there is no option for kids to come back into that community that's going up in value. They're always going to. So that's another consideration, right, is to allow that balance. And at the other end of the age spectrum, it's the aging up. I've lived in my house, my 2,500 square foot house, let's say. I raised my kids. I really don't want to mow the yard. I really would like to take the equity out of my house, let some other family come in, because that's what we're trying to do as a community. But man, I don't want to leave my neighborhood. I love all my friends. I'm close to all the uses that I love. Where am I going to live? So there's a housing type that seems as though it's in short supply in Royal Palm Beach. And that's that smaller unit that could be rental, could be owner-occupied, townhouse, multifamily of some form. Where's that? I mean, it's going to be, right? Otherwise, those folks age out in the community and they lose that connection. And as a community, you lose that brain power and that history and that commitment that you get from residents who love to be in a place, who volunteer, and help out. So that housing stock plays a different role in different communities. And in Royal Palm, that's, maybe that's something that might be worth thinking about, right? Where does the kid live who's coming home from college? Where does the resident live who really doesn't want to live in that big house anymore and wants to stay in the farm? And from a transit standpoint, when the kid comes home from college and can live close to mom and dad, right? In a unit they can afford, they might not want to drive. Millennials, my son, didn't want to get a license until he was 21, still doesn't drive his car. My younger son, I don't know when it's going to happen. So they don't really want to drive. So how do we make a place that's attractive for a generation that really doesn't want to own a car, but they want to still be able to move around? What a blessing for a transit service to come in if that's a goal, and give you a premium station in your community. So then you all of a sudden have a place where you want to come home and they can actually have a job, and work, and come home. So just ways to think about how, those different changes might provide a benefit.
I appreciate the conversation. So this is very good. And as you're speaking, we've got very illustrious chief over here. And one of the things, thank you, that I enjoy about being in this village is it is actually, I feel safe, right? Being, just again, living in larger cities, right? So I've lived in Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Manhattan, right? I've lived in a lot of it. And as you know, that transportation networks is like immense. But one of the things that I found is we sometimes have to be very strategic in terms of where we put our rails, because with that will come increased crime and other issues, right? And so as we are thinking about all of this, that's the one thing I would love to just make sure that we're thinking through very carefully. Because I like being in a safe environment. And, I also have the experience of, living in other areas where it's had a negative impact.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. My name is Dennis Erickson. I'm a 31-year resident of Royal Palm Beach, and I friggin' love living here. I could have lived anywhere in Florida when I chose to live here. I was an outside sales rep for an environmental company, and I could choose to live anywhere. And I chose Royal Palm Beach because I asked people, how many trick-or-treaters do you get? Because I had 3 young kids and I wanted to raise them someplace safe. And I thought that's a pretty good indicator. And we still get 100. People in Boston got 600 the other day. It's just amazing. This is a wonderful place. It's a wonderful community. I'm not surprised at all that you haven't visited here as a new urbanist, because this is suburbia. We love suburbia. The people that came here are the people that like suburbia, that rejected urbanism and new urbanism. And so my concern with rail isn't, or I don't have any concern with rail whatsoever. But what I hear, and I'm speaking only as a resident, is I wouldn't want your job, Ray. You do a great job with the counselors, because people are trying to make livings out there. That these big companies own these parcels of land, and there's all kinds of pressure, and there's going to be all kinds of pressure to continually redevelop them in the developer's favor, because that's what they want to do. You guys are fighting for the residents. So as a resident, I'd like to say that my one and only criteria for whether you guys are doing a good job on your State Road 7 plans is whether traffic counts increase or decrease as a result of your changes. Because I've been around transit, and if there's anything worse for removing traffic congestion than building more lanes, it's bus routes that nobody rides. I don't think there's ever going to be funding for light rail down that part. When I say we, my family is, as local suburban homeowners, all we want to see on State Road 7 is whatever changes you make, less traffic. I know that, the bad thing about transit is it requires density. And at some point, they're going to say, if you want less traffic on State Road 7, let's build all of these houses and this light rail, and all of this congestion is going to go away. And we're in this. That was 2 lanes, and that was 4 lanes, and that was 6 lanes. It's always more traffic. So my one vote as one citizen is, that's the only criteria that you guys should be measuring for the average homeowner. It's just going to create more traffic and less traffic. Because right now, it's like coming up on Christmas season, it's like 3 or 4 lane changes to the staff on State Road 7. It's not going to be better.
So Dennis, how long have you lived in Florida?
In Florida?
31 years in Royal Palm. Oh, your whole life, okay. So there's,
I was born in the 50s.
so there's 22 million people here now.
Right.
There were, in 1970, there were 6 million people here.
Yeah, 4 or 5 million.
And 50 years from now, there's going to be 35 million people here. How do we deal with that as a state? How do we deal with that? And that is the challenge. Like you just said, people don't want State Road 7 to get more crowded, but we know in the next 50 years, we're going to get 14 to 15 more people in this state. Where do we put them?
Yeah, but with the village is built out, we don't have to have more people in the village.
Is there capacity on State Road 7 with those plazas as they exist today?
The thing that kind of confuses me is you're talking redevelopment, like these are brownfields or state roads, that were built 50 or 100 years ago. Most of this stuff is recent stuff. That 450-foot right away, that's like that development can't be more than 20 years old.
Built for a single use, not easily adapted to anything else. Doesn't provide, it provides shelter for the goods that you want to buy for years, but it doesn't provide any necessarily positive experience. You raised good points. And this idea that, the growth is going to continue. By the way, as far as suburbia versus urbanism and all that, majority of land in cities is dedicated to single family houses. So whether the single family houses are in town or midtown or out of town, it's still single family houses and they generate the same level of traffic. The question is, are you providing, when you look at the long range transportation plan, you look at where the, origin and destination trips are, where are people commuting to and from, where are they going, where are all these cars coming from? I can't say this with definitely right now relative to the land uses that are in Royal Palm Beach, but I know that a lot of these commercial uses will generate more trips per day than single family houses.
I'm not criticizing.
Yeah, no,
I'm giving feedback that probably the average homeowner, not the business owner, certainly not the electeds and staff, but just the people who live here. We want less traffic. So when you're making all of these complex decisions, please favor the ones that have less traffic counts.
By the way, I love your living style.
You can use
I have. That's one of my favorite things. It's funny. It's really funny you mentioned that because as I was driving around photographing, trick or treat. You see, wrong.
The tree can't be.
This is a great place to live.
Yeah, okay, I've been here 40-some years and I'm going to like maybe one of these assisted living. The other thing with me was Dennis was bringing up that single family home, not apartments. Affordable housing should not be apartments. Families with kids, they deserve affordable single family home that has a backyard that you can put a swing set, fence it in so the dog can run around out there. Seeing all this, quote, affordable housing, shoving people in apartments, it's not right. And like Dennis was saying, housing, doing single family homes, like you said, would create less traffic because you don't have the density. That's one thing I think the village needs to address too, because all this new development, we've got the apartments going behind the new density and, all the.
Well, we have to be careful with that because I didn't say that the single families create less traffic. And so, when we have, miles and miles and miles, the reason why there's so much traffic, there's a lot of reasons why there's so much traffic on cities. And one of which is because of the development. You don't have a network of streets. You've got like a few roads, but, and we could spend all night talking about it. But our purpose here tonight, remember though, is to think about, and I love the conversation, but I don't want us to get off track. We want to think about, if not what's on State Road 7 and those commercial parcels today, then what? Then what is beneficial for the village so that your village elders and your staff can craft together the rules that are going to protect you all from what may be coming in the future. And it's development or growth or change on your terms to the extent possible. Because right now, you're lucky that you've got the staff that you do that are going to fight, against bad growth. But you see it all over the place.
And one thing we have to thank council for is we are one of the few municipalities that are debt free right now.
That's amazing.
You
Considering
don't
the
see
investment.
that too often.
And the lowest taxes of
And the lowest, we have
that
not
provide
raised our
services,
village in
full
how many
services.
years? 1.2.
26.
Yeah.
So Diane, do you want to say no? Low taxes, low debt, money now, lots of trick or treaters.
Yeah, to be in my house that many years, when I get my tax bill, and I'm only paying taxes on, $100,000.
Listen, I feel you with the insurance. I'm sick and tired.
I know, I just got my thing, we can't progress, and we can't, my agent who is here in Rural Palm Beach, the gal, I was up and down there, she said, wait till December 1st after hurricane season, and some more, businesses, since we didn't have a storm this year.
Mary, any thoughts?
I
I know.
Thanks for the presentation. Just to put context again. We need to get input and data points and information and hear from the community on the thoughts on that cause. That's what this whole process is. So that we can make decisions that are data-driven and intelligent. But we're not going to deviate from the policies that we've had in the past. We're controlling growth. I just want to comment on traffic. I love when I hear complaints about traffic because, and I'll be honest with you, the answer to your concern about traffic is it's only going to get worse. We are living in a car-centric environment. All of the ground rules from the Federal Highway Administration is here to pump dollars into building more roads. Very few dollars into building other transportation solutions. Speaking out as the mayor, but speaking as the chair of the EPA, our mission is to change that trajectory and to make, when we talk about the future, 15, 20 years from now, we want to have an environment across Palm Beach County where cars become optional, not a requirement for their occupation. So to do that, we're going to have to create a very robust, connected public transportation system. And do that, it's amazing the technology that's available today for new transit systems. We're not going to see trains all over the place. There's some technology solutions that other countries are using already, right? And unfortunately, I think we're kind of playing catch up, but we work that up. But that's the vision, and that's the concept in terms of the
Like monorail, is that one?
I like the monorail.
That's what
Well,
and like,
I like monorail like solutions. There are a lot of solutions out there. In 15, 20 years, you're going to see other cars. One of the things we have to decide to do is where can we put our public transport? That's a good question.
On top of Walmart.
But I'm just saying, that's the reality, that part of what we're dealing with. Having this information provided for us in the study that will just equip us better to make more intelligent decisions about what we need to do going forward. I'm maintaining the quality of life that we have here. I've always referred to it as the Mayberry S quality.
Yes. And I do appreciate that. And, I said all that I said, but I do appreciate the proactive nature of this conversation because reacting to something is the worst thing you can do, right? So you end up with something you don't want. So I do appreciate the conversation and really thinking sort of outside of the box a bit and thinking futuristically and having those conversations. And
my one concern tonight is going directly to the mayor is I was at the meeting that FDOT did several weeks ago. And I was the only resident that was there.
Which one is that?
That was the FDOT, it's 2 weeks ago, they had here. And it's 6:30. I was the only resident. Yeah. They were 7, yeah, between Southern and over to their improvements and stuff. How do we get our residents more involved?
I leave that up to you.
The problems we have here.
The state 07 subject, you gotta, know if I do. How long has that been going on?
Yeah.
You remember when we had to sign up, you couldn't go on state, right? And what was the sign? The future extension, and we know the battle we went for that. I think that's state 07 is the team.
Yeah. Right. Not understanding.
Yeah, FDOT has to conduct these public, hearings, because that's part of the protocol as we're moving forward.
But they didn't get, it wasn't any information about the extension, but they said it's in here.
So I got to answer your question.
Yeah.
She's sitting here because at the Rotary meeting, Wednesday morning, I said, we're gonna have this meeting, why don't you all come? Now, that is not a very efficient way. I'm saying,
Yeah, but you got 50% of the public here.
Right.
But ESCOM meeting was advertised on Channel 25 News
That's
at
their attitude.
6:30 in the morning. And like, I'm the only one that knew.
Councilman Mark.
So I was gonna say, the bad news is I had 3 people submitted to come at that meeting. One of them showed up.
And one.
This is hard. This is really, really hard, but it's doable. I mean, so what? So we get one more the next time.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's tragic.
Yeah, it is trapped.
I wouldn't say, well, I don't know the history of participation in the village, but I will tell you, I was at another village tonight, the village of Cuesta. And we had this exact conversation. You know, Treasurer Coast, what are you gonna do to improve public participation in this effort? Because we've gotten 0 lately, and I think we have to keep a lot of things in mind. There's still some COVID issues. People gotten out of the habit of participating.
Well, and the other piece of it then, Jeff, is that you have people that are pretty happy to be here. So when we go into some communities and people can't wait to come and yell because they're mad about stuff. I mean, that, you guys know what happens at cities, right? Like if people are yelling at you, then you change your, people are coming in saying, I thank you because we had a great event. What a compliment.
I might not know what's wrong.
I read your newsletter, Dana circulated your newsletter. Man, who wants to say
That's
that?
amazing.
So,
That is fantastic.
well, that's what I'm beautiful place. So that, this is just opportunity. You know, these couple of spots on State Road 7 and the rest of the community, it's a spectacular community. You know, as you travel the county. So these are opportunities. This is like, well, redevelopment's coming. Capital dollars move to real estate consistently in Florida over time and going forward. That's not going to change. So if that's going to happen, you have all the leverage. Residential isn't permitted, mixed use isn't permitted, and height isn't permitted. Amen. You know, we only have 2 measures to influence development. We have regulatory incentive and we have financial incentive, right? That's what we have. You don't really need financial incentive based on where you're positioned in the market. State Road 7 has lots of trips. You have a lot of growth going on around you. You're in an active community. So financial incentive is really not necessary. Yes, the numbers. Or regulatory incentive is the other opportunity. Right?
Well,
That's your currency. I want you to build this thing. Will allow you through our regulations to gain more value if you comply with these things. So
And that's
what
why
we're trying to do.
the planning activity is
That's
so
right.
valuable.
And I would just like to leave everybody with the comfort of knowing that this is intended to be a very surgical process. This isn't about wholesale change. This isn't about turning over the apple cart within the village. It's really trying to get ahead, just like I'm telling you, just like you're doing in Wellington. Get ahead of all signs are indicating that, you know, the retail is still free fall. Okay. And we are in a dynamic situation with commercial real estate. Okay. We don't know where we're going to end up. So let's at least have a game plan in place. Hopefully we won't have to use it. Maybe you won't have to use it. But if you do, you already know, you know, you're not going to start flat footed. And what are we going to do? What's appropriate for, you know, how are we going to change for these commercial parcels? So that's really, I think, this is, in some ways, I think, and I hope this is, you would have concurred this a bit, is that in some ways, this is an insurance policy so that you have control over what change occurs. Well, as we mentioned, if there's no more comments or questions, Councilwoman Dusty, do you anything you would like to add?
No,
Thank you. Any thoughts that you have, please, this is meant to be a free-flowing conversation. Please reach out. We keep the doors and the line of communication open.
No, Mayor, since you're, the TPA did a survey online, and I made that here a couple months ago. What kind of feedback did you get? It was a survey about the utility corridor.
We just closed that survey on November 12th. Our piling results. from
Okay,
that.
okay.
We have a an update presentation that's going to the GPA's committee and governing board in December. And we will be launching our second virtual workshop that will also have a survey integrated into that workshop as well on December 4th. And we will actually, TPA will be at the Royal Palm Beach Free Market with booths that will have on that same day. So if you want to take the survey there or come up with boards, I'll be there, and then Melissa, our public relations director. But with the public getting outreach and getting feedback, the virtual world has been very successful for us because we're not capped to one night. We can open it up for 3 months and keep pushing on social media, media blasts, newsletters, and we've had over 1,300 people visit our site to learn about it. We've had 500 new people, like first time, which means all the others are returning people. And the last number I saw, we had over 200 complete the survey, with about 700 actually open up the survey. Those are the numbers that we had last check. And then our interactive comment map and drop pins down and talk about like concerns on the corridor. We had over 100, or at least over 100 down. So.
And this is a technique that we may employ for this effort as well. We'll discuss that.
And to say one more thing, Dennis, to add to what you and Diane are saying here, the everything we have here has been because of our partners, the TPA, the MPO. I think we've successfully got grants from them almost every year, close to $500,000 to build this bike path network. With that plan, when the county comes in and does something, they abide by the plan. When the state came in and did State Road 80, they put the 10-foot sidewalks on and the on-street bike paths that most people are scared to get on. But they're there and they have landscaping. It's the only section of State Road 80 that has landscaping in the middle and on the sides the way it does, and the decorative lights, because we have partnered with them. What the TPA is doing in their effort to establish a premium transit system in Palm Beach County as an alternative to transportation, doesn't have to be your prime one, but it can be an alternative one for many people. And I'm telling you, go to their study and look at that path that they did. I think it hits 40% of the population of Palm Beach County.
Within the radius on our 561 plan, what
Yeah.
you're referring to, we get within 2 miles, which accommodates the pedestrian, bicycle, and that first 6 miles. We have
Over 60% of the population. And what that does is it creates a different future for that 14 million people that come here, and it protects our areas. And if we can keep them on State Road 7 and in that corridor and let them transit around this county without going out west and more bogging up Okeechobee, State Road 80, North Lake Boulevard. That's part of the goal, that to keep the traffic. If they go out west, they're going to drive their cars through us. If they do this corridor with the 60% population, and it becomes a desirable place for the young people to come back to live, for the seniors to live, we can maybe capture a lot more of that 14 million that we otherwise would not.
I have a last question for you guys. 15 years ago or so, I was involved with the then MPO on a similar study of, we were looking at bus rapid transit from Wellington Mall to downtown West Palm Beach. And back then, the thinking was Royal Palm Beach bedroom community, Wellington bedroom community. But now, with all of the jobs created out west, with the pandemic that you've said is going to disrupt travel patterns forever, are there still a lot of people from Royal Palm Beach commuting to downtown? I mean, does anybody have a number on that? Whatever it is, it's.
I know one.
But we'll get, the census has a lot of that information. We have not had an opportunity to study that yet. We will.
I've been fortunate enough for 29 years to have to commute over to Wellington. And my husband was a firefighter out here over in Wellington for 30 some So we have not experienced having to, drive into town every week. Now, when I did have to drive into town 30 years ago, down to South Lake Worth, Southern Boulevard was 2 lane, Okeechobee was 2 lane, Forest Hill Boulevard was 2 lane. It used to take me over an hour to get to work. So I've been blessed being able to live in the community and basically work in the community here. And that's very important for a lot of people.
When I have to sit at the light at Royal Palm and Okeechobee, it adds 3 minutes to my 7-minute commute.
We're all sitting here trying.
All right, well, that's what we're doing. Punch out the fun.
What's the next steps?
Were there any questions online, by the way?
No. I have been checking though.
So the next steps, let me go through this briefly with you, the sort of schedule. We, our first bit of focus is going to be working on the, this connectivity and mobility analysis, looking at these different linkages and connections within the village and, to the south of Southern. We're trying to schedule our work product to align with the schedule of the TPA's work products. So we were a little bit late in starting our interviews so that we could follow the TPA. We're very sensitive to there being, interview fatigue or workshop fatigue. And, I just go to a different thing. What is this difference? So there's a lot of opportunity for confusion. But then we intend to be, and then we'll start to develop some of these scenarios. We're going to check off the staff, make sure that we're kind of on the right page or going in the right direction. Identify some of these catalytic or these sites to look at and to see what may or may not be appropriate. I mean, we'd like to get more input as we go forward. I was just talking to Jessica, who's the brains of the operation. We may talk to Bradford and the manager and see if we put out a survey, potentially a digital survey, ramp that up, because we want as much information. We don't hear it from you now, we're going to hear it later.
Yeah.
But then we intend to be back with a second workshop to sort of show you some of the things that we've developed, some of the concepts and ideas, probably around March 8th. So we're going to work through the next few months, try to put together some work products, get some more outreach. But again, as I said, the door's always open. If you know somebody that would like to talk to us or give us a call or email, we're always open to that.
Dan, I recall one of your slides was about bike ped connections that are needed. Are there bike ped connections that are missing? So I figured, Dennis, since you're here, you're like.
Ray's on top of it. Governor Beach is the one that's going to do it.
Right.
I cross Okeechobee on my bike every day.
We're still pursuing it.
Yeah, that'd be pretty true. That's for sure.
Next Southern. Last, are you doing this in conjunction, in coordination with Wellington? Facing the identical problems.
Yes and no. Their problems are, that's been such an odd effort with them. When we started with, I think you'll indulge me in the state sector, we started working with Wellington back in, I forget, December 2019 when we started talking to them. Their primary focus was, we want a market study. We want to know what's happening. We want to know where we stand in terms of growth. We're almost built out, but now we got this owner, Starwood, of the Wellington, the Mall of Wellington Green, and they got this idea about a fiscal lagoon, and we don't know if we should prove, we don't know if it's real, but so help us understand this through a market study, etc. The pandemic hits, we actually at that point stopped because we're like, does it really make sense to be doing a market study when we don't know if the food supply is going to be? Remember, we were washing groceries back, so we had no idea what was going on. So we broke that into phases. They've got a strong growth potential in housing. They really do. In the next 5 to 10 years, they've got potential of 1,000, 1,500 units that they can grow within the So they don't have the space. And then things started happening with the mall. The mall currently is in receivership. We've actually met with the court-appointed receiver of the mall. The mall is actually fractured into 5 different, and this is one of the challenges about even contemplating redevelopment of something like that. It's in Macy's owns their piece, Penny's owns their piece, and Dillard's owns their piece. Dillard's supposedly is performing the strongest. Starwood owns the mall itself. That's what's in receivership, the sort of central guts of it, and Nordstrom's is owned by Starwood out. So there's essentially 5 different owners. And as I said, the scale of it is really insane. Speaking of new urbanism, have any of you ever heard of the town of Seaside at the Panhandle? And that's where the Truman Show was filmed, the movie. That's 80 acres. That would fit very comfortably inside of the mall. That's how much space it's in. So, and just to wrap that up, there's actually parallels, because what we're doing is working with the village to come up with concepts for what the phased or complete redevelopment of this might look like. You know, you can check a lot of boxes by redeveloping big malls like that. Like you can put in green space, you know, it's all asphalt and rooftop right now. But they're approaching it in a manner that this is not a hostile takeover. You know, we want the mall to succeed. But as I said to you earlier, all evidence indicates around the country, even the Gardens Mall, Tim can tell you, is contemplating, you know, some tinkering around the edges in terms of redevelopment, some parking lots. And they're one of the strongest ones. So their approach in Wellington is that we're not hoping for your demise, but we're not counting on your success. And so, like I told you, we can't start flat, because I gotta believe that the owners of the mall aren't going to give the village 9 months or 6 months notice saying, hey, we're going to go out of business, so get your act together and travel, what you're going to do. They're going to read about it. And then they got to start thinking. So that's why they're going through this process. But it's very delicate, because, you know, the mall, the receiver of the mall, their job is to resuscitate. And so we're not, it's just a very delicate situation. But long answer to your short question, I don't even know if I answered your short question. But there are similarities, but there are differences. We're not looking at lots of parcels. You know, we're not looking at all the commercial parcels. It was a different objective, but similar challenge. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking your time and energy and focus.
Right now.
Share into the top part. Is that one? You might have to put that
Sure.
I just want to make sure this one.
Thank you very much. Good job. Be safe.